So there's a ton of uncertainty regarding the state of education here lately, from, budget cuts to eliminating the literal Department of Education. No big deal. We're going to get into it. I'm Mallory Hagan.
And I'm Maggie Gehlsen-Burnett. This is Pretty Furious. This episode is brought to you by Basic. Located in the heart of downtown Birmingham, Alabama, Basic is a 100% women-owned and run slow fashion and ethical lifestyle store. All apparel, art, and decor at Basic is responsibly made by individuals paid living wages within dignified working spaces. In addition, they donate a portion of every sale to human rights efforts. You can visit Basic in person in downtown Birmingham, Alabama, or shop at www.abasicshop.com. Use code PRETTYFurious for 15% off your first purchase.
Well, Maggie, do we value education in America?
Honestly,
It certainly doesn't feel like it.
yeah, I don't know. I think the concept of talking about education right now is a daunting one, right? Because it requires us to think about the people who voted in this last election. And that for me is the hardest part about any elimination of education or educational resources whatsoever, is thinking about the incredibly misinformed population of voters who are really, really interested in Donald Trump being our president. So yeah.
Beyond being our president, they seem to be very interested in him being our dictator. They seem to
Correct.
not have studied history. I think there's a meme going around that's like, we're here because too many of you had football coaches for history teachers. And listen, I had football coaches for history teachers. And I'm not going to poo poo on my football coach history teachers. However, there is some truth to that sentiment. I do recall many, many, many a class times just watching a movie instead of doing our coursework. And
100%.
something tells me that's not uncommon.
The amount of times I watched Remember the Titans or National Treasure in my high school history classes is pretty diabolical, which
Right?
relates really well into talking about the state of education, which is something that we're going to get into. So,
Yeah. And we're calling these episodes where it's just myself and Maggie big mad, so that we're diving into a single topic. We don't have a guest, and we hope that these help you learn something or think differently about an issue. And if it does, we hope you'll stick around and leave us a review. We would love that. We need to counteract our mid review from last week.
I was kind of hoping for another one.
We'd love if you like, follow, share, all of those things everywhere you can find us at Pretty Furious Pod.
All right, Mallory, can't be pretty furious without being pretty first. What's your product this week?
I tell you, I don't know if I appreciate the fact that we set up this whole being pretty thing, because sometimes I think I want to show up to this podcast wearing no makeup and a ball cap, and I don't know if we've set this up for success. But I digress. This is the only bougie thing I have in my beauty skincare regimen
I love it.
routine, but it is Skin Better Science, the Alto Advanced Defense and Repair Serum. And
Mm.
I didn't think I needed to spend that much money on anything. It is actually transforming my skin. It has reduced the redness in my face. It's making me look younger. What? Anyway, that's
Mallory,
mine.
would you do
What's
me a
yours?
quick favor? Would you say serum again?
Serum? Serum?
Yeah, I kind of it came out serum,
I
and
have officially
I
been back in Alabama longer than I was gone. So I got some serum,
listen.
y'all.
Get your serums. Skin Better Science is a really good brand, though.
Just as a sidebar, this is one of those items that I got a facial and she used these products at the facial. And I was like, oh, okay, great. That sounds great. Yeah, I'll have one of those. She rang it up in addition to my facial. And I was like, I'm sorry, what? But then we've all been here. We've all been here. Then I was like, I'm not gonna be like, oh, just kidding. How much is that? So I bought it. But you know what? It was actually worth it. So
Yeah,
there we
Skin
go.
Better Science makes good stuff. Okay, so my product is the Carito. I've never heard of this brand, but they sent me some stuff recently and I was interested to try it. It's a Korean beauty brand. And this is the Wonder Relief Centella Serum Unscented. This is supposed to be soothing. So it's really good for sensitive skin, calming redness, irritation. And this, I will tell you, feels lovely on the skin. It's like got a really kind of, it's like a thicker texture when it comes out, but then once you put it on your skin, it's a thinner texture, which I really appreciate. It's great for, you just have like general dry skin, irritation, all the things. I've been traveling a ton lately. And so being on airplanes and I was out in Denver for a few days, and it's just like being in like dry areas, you know? So this has been amazing and I really enjoy it so far.
I'm going to try that. You have been traveling a lot. You've been all over the place.
February into March was a crazy, crazy month of sort of unexpectedly. So we did San Diego, went to Chicago for a taping of Oprah's book club, came back here, went to Denver, went to Iowa City, just beep-bopping around all over the place.
Beep-bopping around.
Beep-bopping, but it was fun.
You got to talk in front of Oprah. So if you all are not yet following Maggie online, I don't know why you're not, but you should be. And you can see where she asked a question at Oprah's book club at Starbs in Chicago.
Yeah.
Super cool. I got teary-eyed when I looked at it.
Oprah said my name. It's my claim to fame.
As always, we'll put these products in our show notes and we do highlight them on our Instagram feed every week. So if you find something from us that you like, let us know. We just share these because we think it's fun. It also just brings some contrast to the fact that we are pretty furious about the state of our world, and the content that we bring you is mostly about that. So we just try to have a little juxtaposition with some serum.
With some serums.
With some serums.
Okay, Mallory, let's hit them with our headlines this week. What headline made you pretty furious this week?
Maggie. UMass Chan freezes hiring, rescinds PhD program admissions amid funding uncertainty. So I would just like you to guess where the funding uncertainty might have come from. Where do you think?
The Neanderthals in Washington for 40,
Yeah,
Alex?
but there's a specific Neanderthal.
My buddy old pal, Donald Trump?
Oh, no.
And even more specific?
Boss. His boss. Who's his
Elon
boss?
Musk.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Well, besides Putin, who's also his boss. So a memo on Tuesday by UMass Chan Chancellor Michael Collins and 3 additional officials from the school reads that a hiring and spending freeze goes into effect immediately. And the memo said that they face uncertainty due to the Trump administration's plan to put a 15% cap on indirect costs on all future and existing grants from the NIH, which is the National Institute of Health. So the school also released a statement saying that several dozen of their applicants who are seeking their doctorate at Morningside Graduate School of Biomedical Sciences were informed that their offers of admission were rescinded.
Cool. Lit.
Because of Doge and Elon Musk cutting funding to the NIH, we have now students who are entering their doctoral programs, med students, research students, that their offers are being rescinded. And that is just insane to me. So that's made me pretty furious.
I mean, it also is wild to me because when we think of this concept of make America great again, and we used to be the best at everything. Why aren't we, coming back to that? It's like, okay, so is your plan for that to make sure that nobody ever becomes a doctor again so that we can have the poorest healthcare and the poorest people? The cognitive dissonance, again, that is required to uphold these belief systems without giving proper funding to certain programs, etc., is insane to me. It's insane. So that's crazy.
Well, I mean, we could go down a whole rabbit hole on this one, but the idea that you're going to be the best globally at anything with an uneducated populace and workforce is kind of insane. What is your headline this week?
Okay, so mine comes from my home state of Iowa.
They don't go like that. We also have serum.
We do have serums in Iowa. They don't talk like that. All right. So this is Senate Bill 235 in Iowa could expose public libraries to more lawsuits. So there's a proposed bill in the Iowa legislature that could open the door to criticism that is coming in the form of a lawsuit. So this Senate file removes the obscenity exemption from public libraries in Iowa. So there's an exemption within the Iowa State Code that basically says that public libraries are exempt from obscene materials that kids may have access to within the library system. So that they may go in and just like happen to see the cover of an R-rated movie or whatever it is. So the state of Iowa wants to remove that exemption, putting librarians, directors of libraries, people who work there generally at fault for allowing children to see any obscene material, check out anything that could be deemed, quote, obscene. Now, in terms of what obscene, again, quote, obscene means, I don't fucking know. And I don't know if that's highlighted really in any of these bills that are introduced. Odds are probably not. So basically, with this exemption being gone, library staff, they are worried that they could get arrested. That's totally fair game. Librarians could also be up for a sex offender registry if any children are exposed to and to obscene material. So it's absolutely insane. First of all, it's this is fascism playing out in real time, folks. And so my brother works within the library system in the state of Iowa. And so this is obviously something that him and I have been talking about a lot. And yeah, it's just crazy. So this would put, when we're talking about the concept of educating the masses and where they go to receive education, public libraries are the one form that's the resource people can go to if they don't have money to obtain any kind of education, like higher education. And so we remove materials from these libraries that's censorship. We're literally just censoring material that people are able to consume. So there's that. And then there's also the fact that librarians cannot be the ones held accountable for any of the, a librarian alone is the one that is going to be held accountable if a kid sees an inappropriate movie case cover or magazine cover. I'm just make it make sense. Make it make sense. And also, how are we keeping track? You know what I mean? It's like the Missouri bills that are introduced for the eHarmony for babies. It's what the fuck are we doing what resources are you employing for any of this? So, yeah.
Well, it's what is the standard? Besides the fact that this is censorship, as you already mentioned, and prohibits free speech, the ability to use public resources in this way, it's also just I'm sorry, aren't Republicans and people who are conservative right now the ones who are running around screaming fuck your feelings and you're a snowflake? So if you're walking through the library and you see something you don't want to see, I don't know, close your eyes, turn your head.
Fuck your feelings.
Fuck your feelings. I don't know what to tell you. But really what this is, collectively, is an attack on higher education and higher learning, critical thinking. And we both know that it's by design. Going back to the NIH cuts, the funding that was cut by DOGE, we're losing students across the country who are entering these critical fields that we need in order for our society to function. And the idea that we have neighbors and community members who are on board with this, this kind of reducing access to information and education is wild, but it's also not surprising.
Yeah, according to the Pew Research Center, over the past 2 decades, the increase in consistently liberal views has been most pronounced among folks who are highly educated. So Republicans have
layman's terms.
Smart people are liberal. We're just going to break that one down for you.
Smart people are liberal.
So Republicans have essentially made education like the boogeyman. If they can remove the access, if they can remove the funding, and if they can remove the importance of robust education like that of higher ed institutions, then they're more readily equipped to spread their message, spread their fuckery, which is reliant for the antidote of higher education to thrive, which is the lack of facts, the lack of critical thinking, and lack of empathy.
And now they've managed to convince people that public education is worthy of dismantling altogether. The idea that, first of all, we've got a WWE CEO running the Department of Education is so fucking mind-boggling to
Fuck,
me that
man.
everyone was like, yeah, that sounds like a great idea. This woman who's been an alleged accomplice to child sexual abuse, she's running the Department of Education before they close it, dismantle it, question mark. But this was all laid out in Project 2025. So,
Mhm.
the White House talking about dismantling the Department of Education, they use things like, they're going to send it back to the states. And that obscures the fact that students, and especially lower income students in rural areas like we have here, suburban and even urban communities, there are students with disabilities, people who are lower income, all of those kids lose.
Mhm.
So, I mean, I just don't think people realize like the Department of Education is such a critical like champion in enforcing federal statutes, and like they prohibit discrimination. They make sure every student has access to education, and that all helps people reach their full potential, obviously. But it's like dismantling it means we're defunding programs that feed and educate and protect our most vulnerable students. And, there are so many Christians cheering that on.
Off Christians. Yeah, I mean, and there's a lot of misconceptions about what the Department of Education does. So they send money to U.S. public schools. Most public school funding comes from state and local government. The federal government in general provides only a small fraction of schools' overall funding, so it's between 6 and 13%. That's from a 2018 report from the U.S. Government Accountability Office. Two of the most important federal funding streams to public schools are Title I, which basically helps lower income communities, helps with education in those areas. And then under Title I, we have the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, which provides money to help districts serve students with disabilities. So there was more than $15 billion allocated for IDEA, is what that's called, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, in fiscal year 24. So this is an obscene amount of money that is going, well, not obscene really when you factor into the grand scheme, but this is a large amount of money that is going to schools to help students with disabilities. My nephew being one of them, my nephew is autistic. He relies upon programs like these to help him to have different types of ways that he can learn, because he learns in ways that are different from his peers. So that's a big piece that people don't understand. Another big piece that I would be remiss to not mention is, like, I don't know, Title IX. Hello?
Mm-hmm.
Title IX was massively helpful for me when I was at Alabama, right after I experienced my assault my senior year. The Title IX offices there were absolutely phenomenal to me. They helped me to rearrange class schedules. They helped me if I needed to miss a class. In terms of rearranging a class schedule, making sure that I would never have contact with classes or with crossover in classes with my assailant. There are tons of different things and tons of different measures that Title IX helps people with who have been, victims of discrimination, assault. So when you are removing funding for the Department of Education, that automatically falls in there as well. And Title IX has already been, obliterated in a multitude of ways over the last 10 years, but it will just continue to disintegrate over time if we allow to, quote, give states back power in terms of education. On another note, you're going to give Kim Reynolds, the governor of Iowa, who has a GED, you're going to give her the ability to, quote, take back their rights. Like, okay, Kim is fully in there.
I think about that in terms of Alabama's public education system as well. I mean, be fucking for real. Be for real. We are consistently at the bottom five of just about every measurable category, because obviously we can't, put two and two together in this state. And you want everyone to be in charge of their own education. Okay.
Is Kay Ivey still the governor?
She's 685 years old.
She's so old.
I think when you mention $15 billion being a drop in the bucket, I would hope it goes without saying that so many of these programs, especially the programs in place to help students with disabilities, are already underfunded. People hear $15 billion and they think that's a lot of money, and it's really not. And so many of our schools are struggling with the amount of teachers and resources they need already. So removing this is just going to make all of that worse. But I also think what's interesting is people going back to that concept of like having control over what's being taught in their schools. The Department of Education already doesn't have power over what's being taught. They have power over standards, but Trump has said, he wants to get rid of like wokeness, and they've gone after critical race theory, which is just Black history. And there's this idea that closing the Department of Education will, return all education back to the states, and it's already up to the states to determine what is taught in classrooms. And it's actually the Every Student Succeeds Act, otherwise known as ESSA, I guess, ESSA, which was enacted during the tail end of President Obama years, and it clearly laid this out. So it was shaped in part by the concerns of No Child Left Behind, which was enacted during the Bush administration, and they thought that that was like teetering on government overreach. So when they reauthorized as ESSA, they made it clear that the states had control and were able to determine what was taught in classrooms.
God, what I wouldn't give for George Bush to just be in office right now.
Right? Did you ever think you were going to be like, I miss Bush? All I can think about when I think about George W. Bush is, if anybody watches Cat Williams or is a fan of his comedy, I certainly used to be. He has a comedy set where he talks about George Bush, and he says, "You get on that horse, you gotta ride it." So I can't hear George W. Bush without thinking, "You get on that horse, you gotta ride it."
My favorite George Bush, like, just cultural reference is just like, this is terrible, but all of the memes that have been made from what's his face going in there and whispering in his ear that the second tower was hit on 9/11, and they like made that into a meme where it's like someone whispering and it's like, "Sir, your Taco Bell is delayed from DoorDash," or something. It's like literally awful. But
I think my favorite clip of him of all time is him ducking those shoes. He was at some press conference and somebody started throwing shoes at him, and he's just like, I mean, he got some moves.
Phenomenal.
Anyway, we miss Bush. What?
We miss Bush, man.
Take us back to simpler times.
I'll take you back to a simpler time right now. So another aspect that the Department of Education has sort of governance over is federal student loans. So the Education Department is responsible for the mechanism that gives access to college financial aid, which is FAFSA, the Federal Application for Federal Student Aid. More than 17 million current and aspiring college students fill out the FAFSA every year in order to qualify for student loans, for grants, and more. For many, it is the only way that they can get help paying for college. So I was one of the students who filled out the FAFSA. I still have trouble saying it. FAFSA. And yeah, it was one of the only ways that I was able to go to the school that I went to, which was egregiously expensive, and because it was an out-of-state school, and I was given pretty little in scholarship money from the University of Alabama. It was a way for me to go to school out of state, not have to go to the University of Iowa, and it was also a way for me to not have to take on private loans, which all four of my siblings, I believe, all took on some form of private loan in some capacity. So the FAFSA is important, and let's be clear, I was, at the time I was going to college, from a upper middle class white family in the middle of America. So that's saying a lot, that like my parents could not afford to send me to school without federal aid. So if it's applicable in my scenario, from like the viewpoint of a privileged white woman in America, it is even more crucial and even more important that FAFSA remain in place for underprivileged and underfunded communities that would need it. So it's just one of the other ways that we do not even consider how the Department of Education plays a role in the bigger picture. Students need to go to college. Kids need to be able to have the option to go to school. People need to have the option to be able to leave their hometowns, to experience other things, to experience other cultures, other people, other ideas. That is how we build a generation that is smarter, that does have more cultural understanding of their peers and of how we can actually make our country better. So again, it's the attack on, liberal wokeness and kids going and getting an education. that really is the agenda of the Republican Party as it stands.
Yeah. So I think it's like 120 billion that the federal aid helps with when it comes to like grants and work study and all that. And then there's also the Pell Grant that is administered through the Department of Education. And that's, I think it's like another 33 or something. So there's, again, when you look at numbers like that, people think like, oh, that's so much money. But when you compare it to other elements of our nation's budget, it's a drop. But I think it's
Like our military?
yeah,
Question mark?
yeah. It's a drop in the bucket. And I can't remember where this quote is from, and I'll try to find it. But essentially, there's something to be said, though, when you attack education and we start attacking professors. There's this quote that talks about when you begin attacking educators, professors, people who are helping to shape the minds of the next generation, that you are far into fascism, far into autocracy. And that's where we're at. I mean, if you consider how many people talk about our education system indoctrinating students, meanwhile trying to put the Ten Commandments and prayer in school, if you consider how often they think that certain books or certain professors are changing their minds, making them more liberal, whatever it might be, without the understanding that education is meant to teach you critical thinking. And the ability to think critically about something is what allows you to see it from different perspectives and shape your ideas or your political beliefs based on that. But, there's no denying that this is all on purpose, right? So the other thing most people, I feel like, don't realize the Department of Education does is they track student achievement. So they oversee what's called the National Assessment of Educational Progress, or the nation's, quote, report card. And it's considered the gold standard of student achievement tests and subjects. And so whether you consider reading or math or science, it has basically served as a yardstick for student achievement. And it's really been valuable. I mean, it helps, like, even though every state is determining what's taught in schools, this report card allows us to know that the students in Alabama are on the same playing field as the students in Nevada and vice versa. And so it sheds light on where we're seeing gaps in education. And by using that report card, states can then better inform what they are teaching their students K through 12. So this assessment has been mandated by Congress, and that actually predates the Department of Education. So this assessment has been around since before the Department of Education came around, but it is what's under the Department of Education. So just another thing that I think people are confused by about the Department of Education and why we need it and what it actually does for our country and for our students. And I think by being confused about that, people are cheering on something that they do not truly understand. And that is going to cause us a world of hurt.
Quick, I just want to insert a little personal anecdote here. So on election day, I made a post on Facebook, and it was a photo of Ty and I and our I voted stickers. And I had said very, very plainly, I really was not trying to be an asshole for once in my life. And I posted it to Facebook and I said, today I voted for, women's rights, something, whatever. Made this big post. And at the very tail end of it, I said, I voted this way because I possess critical thinking skills. And I got a comment on this post from a Trump supporter who I knew in high school and who still lives in Eastern Iowa. I believe her husband's a cop. She commented on my post and said something to the effect of like, you're acting like a bully because I put in this post that I possess critical thinking skills.
And if the shoe fits, lace it up, go for a run. What do you mean? A hit dog will holler.
What? And I just kind of kept thinking, this was kind of before I think in the last 4 months, and I mean, I'm sure you can relate to this, Mallory. I feel wholeheartedly comfortable putting a Trump supporter in their place online and being
100%.
Unabashedly like grounded in my stance as a liberal, grounded in my stance as somebody who identifies as a progressive, somebody who does possess critical thinking skills, And I think back to that specific moment a lot and what I would have said differently. And I think my reply was pretty snarky, and I unfriended her. Like,
Yeah.
how in the world are you going to tell me that I'm a bully when you voted for one? What's wrong with you? And just because you're offended that I said I possess critical thinking skills because I voted for somebody who wanted to, I don't know, give people down payments for their first home and relieve student debt. And just because you think that like that's an attack on you, again, if the shoe fits, totally fine. But it's this concept that critical thinking, that has been sort of a weaponized term of the left for many years. Like we have always said, well, the left possesses critical thinking skills. We have more education under our belts. And a lot of critics of the left or of the Democratic Party, maybe, will say that that is one of the faults of the left, is that we are the ones who think we're smarter than everyone. We're the ones who are saying that we possess critical thinking skills, case in point. And I just want to say to that like anybody criticizing that form of thinking, you're pissed that somebody identifies as having critical thinking skills. Why does that offend you? Like, what? That's what I wanted to say to this woman is like, why does it offend you that I said I possess critical thinking skills? Now that makes me a bully? What's wrong with you? That is a fundamental insane track of thinking. So I just wanted to insert that about like our education system, critical thinking, and the left. Quick little essay from Maggie inserted there based on a personal story. Like that is how we get into these positions because people don't have access to education. Like that is how we got here.
Yeah. Well, and also I would ask anyone who's demonizing critical thinking skills to question that, which would be critical thinking. But like, that would be critical thinking. Like, why does that upset you? That someone possesses the ability to dig deeper on a topic or issue.
Another big piece of all of this is recognizing and understanding the insane work that teachers across America are doing. I have several friends who are teachers and several friends who are teachers in the state of Iowa. And it is a bleak place to be right now, to be a public education teacher in the United States generally. So I just want to say, like, if you were a teacher and you were listening to this, I think the work you're doing is incredible. You deserve to be compensated fairly for that work. I'm so sorry that you're not being compensated fairly for that work or appreciated in the way you deserve. And so, yeah, that's another piece of this, is that there are a lot of educators who, in our public school system, who do vote red. And I think that's another piece, is drawing attention to this topic and helping people to understand how their vote plays a role in this bigger picture. But here's the deal, like, none of this truly can be accomplished without Trump having backing from Congress. So you can't just close the Department of Education or with an executive order. That's not a thing. So if you are somebody who is like, oh my God, what are we going to do? How do we prevent this? Call your congressperson every day. If you are in Peoria, District 16, call Darren LaHood every single fucking day. His kids are getting a private education. So call him.
Oh my God, we didn't even get into the privatization of education and how
privatization.
all of these people are trying to defund public schools as a whole.
Yeah, so that's a major thing that you can do. Call your congresspeople. Like, do not let up on these people. It works. We have seen this firsthand. Both Mallory and I have seen how this impacts locally, our districts. Mallory, you have seen this when you have run for office. Like, these things matter. These things make a difference. And so we cannot just sit here and be like, oh, well, what are we going to do? They're closing the Department of Education. Like, he can't just do that. He can't just sign an order and be like, yep, we're closing down. Like, that's not how this works. So, yeah, if you feel like you are just at a loss for what to do, download the 5 Calls app, make a few calls to your congresspeople. That is the most efficient way to be sure that this does not happen and that we can prevent our education from being further demonized.
I also just want to point out that I often think people who live in like solidly red districts, me, for instance, they think I'm not going to call my congressperson. It doesn't matter. And I want people to better understand that their representatives do what they do because no one's holding them accountable. Their phones aren't ringing off the hook. They are not feeling the pressure of their constituents. And so when you decide you're not going to call, you think it's not going to make a difference, I just want to reassure you that it does. It makes a huge difference, especially if that person feels like they have no competition, there's no real reason for them to answer to their constituents. It will make a difference. And if nothing else, it fucks with their head. and it makes their day
Exactly.
worse. And honestly, if they're not going to do what's best for their constituents, we can at least make their lives a living hell.
I've been thinking about this a lot lately, how there are a lot of people on the left who want to say that Trump's entire game is incredibly stupid or that he hasn't thought very in depth about the next steps of this plan. And I just want to say one thing I've been thinking about is actually how this is all by design and it's all intentional. So this entire process of making education more difficult to access is actually not a quote stupid play by Trump
Oh, of
or by his
course.
administration. It's an incredibly devious and intelligent plan that they have all curated to ensure that the American public gets stupider so that we don't care or notice or give a fuck about what they're doing behind the scenes. And so I just want to draw attention to that. I don't think that Trump is like the dumbest person alive. I actually think he's thought a lot about how this all plays out in the grand scheme. And he's even quoted, saying many years ago, I think in the 90s, like if he were to ever run for president, it's the famous quote, if he were to ever run for president, he would run as a Republican because Republicans are stupid. And so making
Yeah.
education harder to access is all part of the plan. It is all a piece of the puzzle, one of the biggest pieces, arguably.
Yeah. It is one of the biggest pieces of the puzzle. And I would take it a step further and say, I don't know that Trump is the person who was a part or in any room orchestrating the plan. He is their chosen Trojan horse in order to make sure it gets executed. And that's why
For
so
sure.
many of us were screaming at the top of our lungs about Project 2025. We mentioned that dismantling the Department of Education at the beginning of this episode was all a part of that. It's outlined like page 1. So there are pretty powerful forces at play, very wealthy people at play. This is a huge undertaking that they have spent many years bringing to fruition. And every single time that a voter doesn't think past a headline, they play right into this plan. They play right
Mm-hmm.
into Project 2025. They play right into the people who are puppeteering Donald Trump, and they play right into the throes of essentially capitalism. And
Yeah.
if you're stupid and we're all fighting each other, then nobody's taking a look at what's going up and down, meaning class
Mm-hmm.
wars. So that's a whole different
Exactly.
conversation, but you're right. It's all by design. None of this is by
Yeah.
accident. And I know it is much darker than most people even begin to realize.